Chapter 1: The Impossible Proposition. A sharp whine cut through the evening air, silencing the hum of streetlights and sending an eerie pulse across the sky. The holographic projection that followed blazed brighter than the moon, casting long, wavering shadows on the gathered crowd below. On every screen, every device, the visage of a towering alien emerged, a being of jagged angles and glowing veins, with an aura of command that seemed to crush the air itself. "I am Supreme Strategist Zorthak of the Galactic Dominion," the figure declared, his voice a thunderclap across the world. "By order of the Council, your planet is to submit immediately, or face annihilation." Captain Liam Cross leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark, perpetually messy hair. The room around him, a hastily assembled command center deep beneath Washington, was a swirl of motion. Analysts pored over data streams, generals barked orders, and technicians scrambled to keep their outdated equipment online. Liam's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Patch me through," he said, his calm demeanor masking the churn of his thoughts. A flicker of static later, and Liam's face appeared on screens across the globe, sharing the stage with Zorthak's imposing figure. "Strategist Zorthak," he began, his tone smooth and unflinching. "Captain Liam Cross, Earth's representative. Before we discuss terms, I have to ask, how many planets have fallen to the Galactic Dominion?" Zorthak's glowing eyes narrowed, his mandibles twitching in irritation. 6,312. "Your primitive world will be but a footnote in our history." "Impressive," Liam said, leaning forward slightly, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the console. "But tell me, strategist, how many of those worlds fought back?" The room froze. Even the hum of the machinery seemed to pause as Zorthak tilted his head, a faint ripple of confusion breaking through his arrogance. "Fought back," he echoed, his tone dripping with disdain. "Your weapons are archaic. Your ships are non-existent. What hope could you possibly cling to?" Liam smiled, a thin, sharp thing that barely touched his eyes. "Hope, strategist, is what humans are made of. And we've learned a thing or two about turning the odds. Care for a demonstration?" Before Zorthak could respond, Liam gestured to the technician beside him. The room dimmed as the lights switched off, replaced by a projection of Earth's history. Images of revolutions, battles, and moments of defiance flashed across the screen, moments when humanity stood on the brink and clawed its way back. Every time we were told to kneel, we stood. Every time we were outmatched, outgunned, outnumbered, we found a way. We're not just fighters, strategist. We're survivors. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of Zorthak's projection. For a moment, he seemed almost amused. "Survivors, perhaps. But survival is not victory. You will lose." "Maybe," Liam admitted. "But we won't make it easy. And if there's one thing I've learned about bullies, it's this: they rarely expect a fight." Zorthak's mandibles clicked, a sound that could have been irritation or curiosity. "You are bold, Captain. Boldness alone will not save your species. But I find myself intrigued. I will grant you an audience aboard my flagship. Impress me, or prepare for extinction." The projection blinked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. The hum of the machines returned, punctuated by murmurs and the frantic tapping of keyboards. Dr. Elena Marquez approached Liam, her sharp eyes narrowing as she folded her arms. "A bluff?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Not entirely," Liam replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "We've got resilience. We've got ingenuity. And now we've got a shot at making him doubt. And if he doesn't doubt?" Elena pressed, her voice a low whisper. Liam met her gaze, the weight of the world visible in his expression. "Then we'll show him what humans do when we're cornered." Outside, the night sky shimmered as Zorthak's flagship descended into orbit, its silhouette casting an ominous shadow across the land. The clock was ticking, and humanity's greatest gamble was about to begin. The hiss of decompression filled the air as the shuttle's hatch swung open. Captain Liam Cross stepped forward, his boots striking the polished floor of the alien docking bay with deliberate precision. Around him, the environment buzzed with a hum that seemed to resonate in his chest, a subtle reminder that he stood aboard a vessel light years ahead of anything Earth had ever conceived. Rows of alien sentinels flanked his path, their obsidian armor gleaming under the unnatural glow of the ship's lighting. Each was armed with a weapon that hummed faintly, exuding a menacing energy Liam had no intention of testing. "Welcome, Captain Cross," came the voice of Supreme Strategist Zorthak, who stood at the end of the walkway. His towering frame was even more intimidating in person, his bioluminescent veins casting shifting patterns of light across the walls. Zorthak's mandibles twitched in what Liam guessed was either curiosity or disdain. "I trust your journey was uneventful." Liam offered a tight-lipped smile. "As uneventful as being escorted by an armada can be." "Shall we get to it, strategist?" "Earth isn't exactly on vacation." Zorthak's eyes flared briefly, a flicker of amusement, or perhaps annoyance. "Very well. Follow me." The strategist turned and led Liam through winding corridors that seemed to shift subtly as they walked, the walls pulsing with an organic glow. The air was cool and slightly acrid, with a faint metallic tang that clung to the back of Liam's throat. Every detail seemed designed to remind him that he was hopelessly out of his depth, a lone human on a ship that could likely obliterate his planet in moments. They entered a vast chamber dominated by a circular table made of what looked like liquid metal, its surface rippling slightly as Zorthak approached. A holographic map of Earth flickered to life above it, dotted with strategic markers. "Let's dispense with pretense," Zorthak said, gesturing toward the map. "Your planet is defenseless. Its resources are negligible. What possible argument could you offer that would make me reconsider conquest?" Liam stepped closer, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. "You're right," he began, his voice steady. "Earth isn't a technological powerhouse. We don't have fleets or plasma cannons. But what we do have is something no Dominion conquest has ever faced." Zorthak leaned forward, his glowing eyes narrowing. "And what might that be?" Liam glanced at the holographic map, then back at the alien leader. "Unpredictability. Every species you've conquered, every battle you've won, they followed a pattern. Strength versus strength. Numbers versus numbers. But humanity? We don't play by the rules. We innovate. We adapt. We turn what looks like certain defeat into victory." Zorthak tilted his head, his mandibles clicking softly. "You offer rhetoric, not substance. Words alone cannot shift the tide of war." "I'm not finished," Liam said, his tone sharpening. He activated a small device in his hand, projecting Earth's history into the air. Images of guerrilla warfare, resistance movements, and David versus Goliath triumphs played out in vivid detail. "We've faced extinction before," Liam continued. "Plagues, invasions, internal strife. And every time, we've come back stronger. That's what you'll be up against. Billions of people who refuse to give up. Who will find every weakness in your armor and exploit it." Zorthak's mandibles twitched again, though this time the faintest glimmer of doubt flickered in his eyes. "Interesting. And yet, your resilience may merely prolong the inevitable." Liam stepped closer to the table, meeting Zorthak's gaze head-on. "Perhaps. But I'd wager you don't want another protracted conflict on your record. Especially not one that could expose weaknesses the rest of the galaxy might exploit." The room fell silent, the weight of Liam's words hanging heavy in the air. Zorthak's claws tapped the edge of the table, a slow, deliberate rhythm. "Your argument has merit," he admitted finally. "But words are not enough. Show me." Before Liam could respond, an explosion rocked the ship, the floor shuddering beneath them. The holographic map flickered and vanished, replaced by the sharp blare of alarms. Zorthak's eyes flared with rage as a subordinate burst into the room. "Strategist. The rogue faction has initiated an attack. They've taken control of the ship's propulsion systems." Liam's pulse quickened, and he turned to Zorthak. Looks like you've got your demonstration sooner than expected. The strategist let out a low growl. Indeed. If your unpredictable species has any value, now is the time to prove it. The chapter ended with the two of them locked in an uneasy alliance, the stakes rising as the rogue faction's assault plunged the ship into chaos. For Liam, this was no longer just about survival, it was a test of humanity's ingenuity under fire. The sound of Zorthak's command echoed through the alien warship, sharp and unyielding as his soldiers scrambled into action. Liam stood rooted in place for a moment, taking in the scene, the pulsating lights that turned crimson with the alarm, the acrid smell of burning circuitry wafting through the air, and the tense chatter of alien officers barking out orders in an unintelligible language. "We're losing control of the central systems," one of Zorthak's officers reported, his translucent skin glowing faintly with panic. "The propulsion matrix is destabilizing." Zorthak's mandibles flared in frustration. He turned to Liam, his towering form casting a shadow over the human. "Your demonstration begins now, Captain Cross. Impress me." Liam's mind raced. He wasn't a soldier or an engineer, just a strategist who had talked his way onto the ship with sheer bravado. But if humanity's survival depended on him, he wasn't about to fold. "First," he said, pointing at the holographic display showing a rapidly spreading network of red indicators, "we need to isolate the rogue faction's control point. They can't be everywhere at once." Zorthak growled, clearly unaccustomed to taking orders. "My ship is not a primitive vessel, its systems are vast and complex." "Then you'll have to guide me through it," Liam shot back. "Unless you'd rather lose control entirely." For a long, tense moment, Zorthak stared at him, his glowing eyes unblinking. Then he nodded curtly. "This way." As they moved through the labyrinthine corridors, Zorthak barked orders to his subordinates, directing them to secure key areas. Liam couldn't help but notice the strain in the strategist's voice, a crack in the armor of an otherwise unshakable leader. "These rebels," Liam said, breaking the tense silence, "what do they want?" Zorthak's mandibles twitched. "They are disillusioned. They believe conquest weakens us, that the Dominion should turn inward, consolidating power rather than expanding." "So they're zealots," Liam replied, sidestepping a fallen beam that sparked ominously. "Religious, political, or both?" "Both," Zorthak admitted, his tone bitter. "And they are well organized." Ahead, the corridor opened into a control room, its walls lined with glowing panels and alien glyphs. Zorthak gestured sharply, and the room's personnel sprang to life, working furiously to regain control of the ship's propulsion systems. Liam stepped forward, his eyes scanning the alien interfaces. They were incomprehensible, but certain patterns, symbols repeating in clusters, pulsing in time with the ship's alarms, stood out. "Here," Liam said, pointing to a cluster of glyphs. "This pattern, it's a bottleneck. If they've hijacked the system, they'd focus their efforts here, right?" Zorthak studied the display and nodded. "Correct. But their control extends beyond this node. Disabling it will only delay them." "Delaying's better than losing," Liam replied. "We can use that time to find their main access point." Before Zorthak could respond, the room shook violently, sending a cascade of sparks from the ceiling. The lights flickered, and a new voice crackled through the ship's intercom, cold and commanding. "Strategist Zorthak," the voice sneered, "your time is over. The Dominion no longer needs your outdated methods. Surrender now, and perhaps we'll spare what remains of your legacy." Zorthak's claws dug into the edge of the console, his rage barely contained. "Korzith," he growled. "The leader of the rebellion." "Sounds charming," Liam said dryly. "Does he have a weakness?" "Arrogance," Zorthak replied, his voice sharp. "But he's no fool. He will expect resistance." "Then we give him what he doesn't expect," Liam said. He turned to the control room staff. "Can you isolate their communication lines? Force them to reroute?" A technician glanced at Zorthak, who nodded. "It is possible," the technician replied, "but it will take time." "Do it," Liam said. If we can disrupt their network, even briefly, it'll give us an opening. As the technicians worked, Zorthak watched Liam with a mix of curiosity and grudging respect. Your tactics are unconventional, human. Were you a warrior on your world? Liam chuckled, though his expression remained focused. I'm a diplomat. But sometimes the lines blur. The intercom crackled again, Korzitha's voice tinged with irritation. You cannot delay the inevitable, Zorthak. Surrender, or be destroyed. Liam leaned toward the microphone. Korzith, is it? You might want to save the monologue. We're kind of busy down here. The silence that followed was almost as satisfying as Zorthak's brief, surprised laugh. The control room suddenly dimmed as the technicians completed their task. We've disrupted their network, one of them reported. But only for a short time. Good, Liam said. Now let's find their main access point and finish this. The chapter ended with Liam and Zorthak stepping into an elevator, their alliance forged in fire as they prepared for a final confrontation with Korzith and his rebels. The stakes had never been higher, and humanity's ingenuity would once again be tested in the crucible of conflict. The elevator hummed with a low, rhythmic vibration as it ascended toward the rogue faction's stronghold. Liam Cross stood beside Supreme Strategist Zorthak, both of them silent, their focus sharp as steel. The dim light within the lift reflected off Zorthak's bioluminescent veins, casting fleeting patterns across the walls. Liam broke the silence, his voice steady. You know this is a long shot, right? If Korzitha's forces are entrenched, we might not get a second chance. Zorthak's mandibles twitched, his tone measured. Long shots are better than certainty in defeat. Your unconventional strategies have brought us this far, Captain. Let us see how far they can take us. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a sprawling command deck. At its center, Korzith stood tall, his translucent exoskeleton refracting the crimson emergency lights. Around him, armed rebels manned terminals, their focus split between maintaining control of the ship's systems and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Korzith, Zorthak called, his voice booming like thunder. Face me. The rebel leader turned slowly, his mandibles curling into what could only be described as a smirk. Ah, Zorthak. You've brought a human. How quaint. Have you truly fallen so low as to ally with primitives? Liam stepped forward, unfazed by Korzitha's mocking tone. Call us what you want, but I'm not the one hiding behind a coup to prove a point. The room tensed as Korzitha's followers aimed their weapons, their movements precise and coordinated. Zorthak raised a claw, signaling his own soldiers, who had flanked the entrance behind them. The two factions stood in a brutal standoff, the air thick with the potential for violence. Korzith chuckled darkly. You've walked into your own demise, strategist. Surrender now, and perhaps I'll let you leave with your dignity. Zorthak's voice cut through the room like a blade. Dignity is earned, Korzith. Something you've long since abandoned. Liam's eyes scanned the room, his mind working quickly. The rebels' attention was fixed on the confrontation, but their control over the ship's systems remained their true strength. He leaned toward Zorthak, his voice low. We need to break their focus. If we disrupt their control, the rest will follow. Zorthak nodded subtly. What do you propose? Give me a distraction, Liam said, gripping a compact device he had taken from the control room earlier. I'll handle the rest. Zorthak stepped forward, his imposing frame dominating the room. Korzith, let us end this here and now. A duel, your strength against mine. Or are you too cowardly to face me without your lackeys? The challenge drew gasps from both sides. Korzitha's mandibles flared, his pride clearly stung. Very well, he snarled. If it's a duel you want, you'll have it. As the two alien leaders moved to the center of the room, Liam slipped into the shadows, his movements deliberate and calculated. The rebels' attention was locked on their leader, their confidence evident as Korzith squared off against Zorthak. The duel began with a clash of claws and forceful blows, each strike reverberating through the deck like a drumbeat. Zorthak's movements were calculated, his every strike a testament to his experience, while Korzith fought with wild ferocity. Sparks flew as their combat carved deep gashes into the metal floor. Meanwhile, Liam reached the main control terminal. The interface was alien, but its logic wasn't far removed from Earth's own systems. He connected the device and began overriding the rebels' lockdown protocols. The display flared with alien glyphs, warnings flashing as he worked against the clock. Behind him, the duel reached a fever pitch. Zorthak staggered under a heavy blow, his claws scraping the floor as he caught himself. Korzith loomed over him, triumphant. "This is your end, old fool," he hissed, raising his claw for the final strike. But before he could deliver the blow, the lights on the deck flickered and went dark. The rebels' control terminals shut down one by one, and the ship's systems roared back to life under Zorthak's command. Liam stepped out of the shadows, holding up the now-smoking device. "Guess you didn't plan for this, did you?" Korzith spun toward him, his eyes blazing with fury. "You!" Distracted, he left himself open. Zorthak surged forward, delivering a decisive strike that sent Korzith crashing to the floor. The rebel leader lay motionless, his forces frozen in shock. Zorthak rose to his full height, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Surrender, and you may yet live. Resist, and you will share Korzith's fate." One by one, the rebels lowered their weapons, their defiance extinguished. Zorthak turned to Liam, his glowing eyes meeting the human's steady gaze. "Your unpredictability, Captain, has saved my ship. Perhaps your species is not as primitive as I thought." Liam smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. "We get that a lot." As the rogue faction was secured and the ship stabilized, Liam and Zorthak stood side by side, an alliance forged in fire. For humanity, this was more than survival, it was a step toward a future among the stars, built not on conquest, but on ingenuity and resilience.